The crystal chandelier above us caught the light from 1,000 angles as I watched my girlfriend of 3 years lean closer to the man in the expensive suit, her hand resting on his forearm in a way that made my stomach twist into knots. Her laugh rang out across the crowded penthouse, too loud, too eager. She had no idea that the wealthy investor she was desperately trying to charm, the man she thought could change her life, reported directly to me. But what destroyed me wasn't just watching her flirt. It was hearing the words that came out of her mouth next, words I never imagined she was capable of saying about me. "My boyfriend?" Thessaly said, her voice dripping with contempt as she tossed her auburn hair over one shoulder. "He's just a mid-level manager at some boring tech company. Honestly, I'm only with him until something better comes along. Someone with real ambition, you know? Real money." The man she was talking to, Bridger Hollingsworth, one of my top investment analysts, caught my eye from across the room. The color drained from his face. He knew exactly who I was. He'd been in my office that very morning, presenting quarterly projections. But Thessaly was too caught up in her performance to notice his sudden discomfort, too focused on what she thought was her ticket to a better life. I should have walked away right then. Should have ended it cleanly, walked out of that party and never looked back. But I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the marble floor, my hands gripping the champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Because I needed to know. I needed to hear exactly how deep this betrayal went. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up at that party, watching the woman I loved reveal herself as someone I didn't recognize at all. 3 weeks earlier, everything had seemed perfect. Thessaly and I lived in a modest apartment in downtown Seattle, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors' conversations through the walls, and the elevator broke down at least twice a month. I never told her about the money. Not about the 8-figure salary, not about the stock options that had vested over the years, not about the fact that I could have bought the entire apartment building with what I had in my investment portfolio. I'd seen what money did to people, how it changed relationships, how it made you wonder if anyone really loved you for who you were, or just for what you could provide. So, I lived simply. Drove a 7-year-old Honda, wore clothes from regular stores, split restaurant bills, kept my work life deliberately vague. "What do you do again?" people would ask at social gatherings. "I work in tech," I'd say, which was true enough. Project management, mostly. Also true if you considered managing a $2 billion division and overseeing 300 employees as project management. My name is Kestrel Thorne, and I was the Executive Vice President of Innovation at Arcturus Technologies, one of the fastest-growing companies in the Pacific Northwest. At 32, I was the youngest person to ever hold that position. I'd built the innovation division from the ground up, turned it into the crown jewel of the company. But outside the office, I was just Kestrel, the guy who brought home Chinese takeout and watched Netflix documentaries with his girlfriend on Friday nights. Thessaly worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized cosmetics company. She made decent money, enough to cover her half of our expenses, enough to maintain her lifestyle of boutique shopping and monthly spa appointments. But I'd started noticing things over the past year. Little comments about her friends who were dating doctors or lawyers. Wistful sighs when we'd walk past luxury car dealerships. The way her eyes would linger on designer handbags in store windows, calculating, wanting. "Wouldn't it be nice to have more?" she'd say sometimes, curled up on our thrift store couch. "To not have to worry about money? To just live?" I'd pull her closer, kiss her forehead. "We're doing fine," I'd tell her. "We have everything we need." But apparently, we didn't. She didn't. The party invitation had come through my executive assistant, Marlo. Arcturus was hosting a networking event for our top investors and key personnel. Black tie, penthouse suite at the Cascade Hotel, the works. I normally avoided these things, preferring to keep my personal and professional lives separate. But our CEO, Dashiell Crane, had specifically requested my presence. We were announcing a major new initiative, and as the head of innovation, I needed to be there. "Can I bring Thessaly?" I'd asked Marlo, and she'd raised an eyebrow. "You never bring dates to company events," she'd pointed out, which was true. I'd been careful about that. But something made me ask this time. Maybe I wanted to share this part of my life with her. Maybe I was testing something, though I didn't want to admit it. "Make it happen," I'd said. Thessaly had been thrilled when I told her. More thrilled than I'd seen her in months. Her eyes had lit up in a way that should have made me happy, but instead filled me with an uneasy feeling I couldn't quite name. "A networking event at the Cascade?" she'd breathed. "Kestrel, that's where all the rich people go. Do you know how expensive that hotel is?" "It's just a work thing," I'd said carefully. "Nothing too fancy." "Nothing too fancy?" She'd laughed, already pulling out her phone to search for dresses. "This could be incredible for both of us. I could meet people, make connections. You never know who might be there." And there it was, that little edge in her voice that made my chest tighten. But I pushed it away. I was being paranoid, overthinking. She loved me. We'd been together for 3 years. She'd stayed with me through my supposed boring mid-level management job this whole time. That had to mean something. The week before the party, Thessaly went shopping. She came home with a dress that cost more than our monthly rent, a sleek black number that hugged every curve. When I saw the price tag that she'd carelessly left in the bathroom trash, my breath caught. "That's a lot for a dress," I'd said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She'd shrugged, admiring herself in the mirror. "You only get one chance to make a first impression. Besides, I need to look the part. These networking events, the right dress can open doors." "What doors are you trying to open?" I'd asked, and something flickered across her face. Something I didn't want to see. "Just career opportunities," she'd said smoothly. "You know how it is. Who you know matters more than what you know sometimes." The night of the party, I put on one of my good suits. Not the custom-tailored ones I wore to board meetings, but a nice off-the-rack number that looked professional without screaming money. Thessaly spent 2 hours getting ready, her makeup perfect, her hair styled in loose waves that probably cost her another couple hundred at the salon that afternoon. "You look beautiful," I told her, and I meant it. She was stunning. But there was something in her eyes as she checked herself in the mirror one last time, something hungry and calculating that I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I'd noticed and ignored it. I wasn't sure anymore. The Cascade Hotel was everything its reputation promised. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, staff in crisp uniforms who moved like dancers through the crowd. The penthouse suite took up the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline. The Space Needle lit up against the dark sky, Elliott Bay stretching out like a blanket of black silk dotted with lights from distant boats. As soon as we walked in, I could feel Thessaly's energy shift. She stood straighter, her eyes scanning the crowd like a predator assessing prey. I recognized most of the people there, board members, senior executives, major investors, people I worked with every day, people who knew exactly who I was and what I did. "Stay close," I murmured to Thessaly, taking her hand. "Let me introduce you to some people." But she was already pulling away, her attention caught by a cluster of men near the bar, all expensive watches and confident postures. "I'm going to grab a drink," she said. "Mingle a little. That's what these things are for, right?" Before I could respond, she was gone, weaving through the crowd toward the bar. I watched her go, that uneasy feeling growing stronger. Dashiell appeared at my elbow, a glass of scotch in his hand. "Kestrel," he said warmly, clapping me on the shoulder. Glad you made it. We need to talk about the presentation later. The board is very interested in your autonomous systems proposal. We talked shop for a while, discussing the intricacies of our latest AI development project, but part of my attention was always on Thessaly. I watched her work the room, introducing herself to strangers, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear, accepting business cards with a smile that seemed too bright, too practiced. She moved like someone who'd done this before, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Your girlfriend?" Dashiell asked, following my gaze. "Yeah," I said. "Thessaly." "She's quite the networker," he observed, and there was something in his tone that made me look at him sharply. But his face was neutral, unreadable. An hour into the party, I lost sight of her completely. The crowd had thickened, and I was caught in a conversation with our chief financial officer about budget allocations for the next quarter. Important stuff, the kind of thing I normally would have been fully focused on. But I couldn't concentrate. Where was Thessaly? I excused myself and started moving through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces, accepting congratulations on the innovation division's recent successes. That's when I saw her. She was on the far side of the room, near the windows, talking to Bridger Hollingsworth. He was one of my best analysts, young and ambitious, newly wealthy from the startup he'd sold before joining Arcturus. He wore his success like a badge, all designer labels and expensive cologne. And Thessaly was eating it up. I moved closer, staying just far enough away that they wouldn't notice me, but close enough to hear. The music was loud. People were laughing and talking all around us, but somehow her voice cut through it all. "So you work in investment analysis?" she was saying, her hand on his arm in a gesture that was definitely not casual. "That must be so exciting. All that money flowing through your hands." Bridger looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room. "It's just numbers, really. Analysis and projections." "Oh. Don't be modest," Thessaly purred, and I felt my jaw clench. I'd never heard her use that tone before. "A man like you, in a place like this, you're obviously very successful, very important." That's when Bridger's eyes found mine across the room. The recognition was instant, and the panic that followed was almost comical. His face went pale, and he tried to step back, but Thessaly wasn't letting go of his arm. "I should probably," he started, but she cut him off. "Do you come to these events often?" she asked, pressing closer. "I'd love to get to know more people in your circle, successful people, people who are actually going somewhere in life." "Your boyfriend," Bridger said quickly, desperately, his eyes still on me. "Isn't he here somewhere? Maybe we should—" And that's when she said it. That's when my world tilted on its axis and everything I thought I knew shattered into a million pieces. "My boyfriend?" Thessaly laughed, and the sound was cruel, dismissive. "He's just a mid-level manager at some boring tech company. Honestly, I'm only with him until something better comes along. Someone with real ambition, you know? Real money." The noise of the party faded to a dull roar in my ears. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it. 3 years. 3 years of thinking she loved me for who I was, not what I had. 3 years of keeping my success hidden because I wanted something real, something honest. And this whole time she'd been waiting for something better. Someone better. "I need someone who can give me the life I deserve," she continued, oblivious to Bridger's growing distress. "Designer clothes, expensive vacations, a house in the right neighborhood. Kestrel's sweet and all, but he's never going to be anything more than what he is now. No drive, no real ambition, just content to coast through life in mediocrity." Bridger was staring at me now, his expression a mixture of horror and sympathy. He knew what I earned. He knew I could buy and sell everything in Thessaly's wildest dreams without even checking my bank balance. He was trying to signal her, trying to warn her somehow, but she was too caught up in her performance. "So, what do you say?" she asked him, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a seductive whisper, but was loud enough for me to hear every word. "Can I give you my number? Maybe we could get coffee sometime, get to know each other better. I'm very good at getting to know people." That's when I started walking toward them. The crowd seemed to part automatically, people noticing something in my expression, something in the way I moved. Thessaly's back was to me. She was still touching Bridger's arm, still smiling that calculating smile. She had no idea what was coming, no idea that her entire world was about to explode. But Bridger saw me coming. His eyes went wide, and he finally managed to pull his arm free from her grip. "Miss," he said urgently, "I really think you should—" "Should what?" Thessaly interrupted, her smile faltering. "Are you not interested? I thought we were having a nice conversation." I was 3 steps away now, 2 steps. The music seemed to fade even further. Someone nearby had noticed, was nudging their companion, pointing. Word was spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The executive vice president's girlfriend hitting on one of his employees, talking about how she was only with him for his money, except she didn't even know he had any. 1 step away. "Thessaly," I said quietly, and my voice cut through everything else like a knife. She spun around, and I watched her face cycle through a dozen emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, a flicker of fear, then defiance. "Kestrel," she said brightly, recovering quickly, that fake smile plastered back on her face. "There you are. I was just meeting some of your colleagues. This is—" She gestured vaguely at Bridger, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Bridger Hollingsworth," he said miserably. "I work for—" "Me," I finished, my eyes never leaving Thessaly's face. "He works for me. In fact, everyone in this room either works for me or works with me. This is an Arcturus Technologies executive networking event. I'm the executive vice president of innovation. Bridger here is one of my top analysts." I watched the information process, watched her brain scramble to make sense of what I was saying. The smile froze on her face, her hand dropping from Bridger's arm as if she'd been burned. "What?" she whispered. "The boring tech company?" I continued, my voice level despite the storm raging inside me. "That's Arcturus. The mid-level manager? That's actually executive vice president, the position I've held for the last 4 years. The position that comes with an 8-figure salary and enough stock options to retire tomorrow if I wanted to." The blood drained from her face. Around us, people had stopped even pretending not to watch. Phones were being discreetly pocketed. This was going to be office gossip for months. "Kestrel, I can explain," she started, but I held up a hand. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think you can. I heard what you said. Every word. About how you're only with me until something better comes along. About how I have no ambition, no drive. About how you're looking for someone with real money to give you the life you think you deserve." Tears were forming in her eyes now, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another performance. "I didn't mean it," she said desperately. "I was just trying to impress him to—" "To what?" I interrupted, and I couldn't keep the hurt out of my voice anymore. "To line up your next boyfriend before breaking up with your current one? To trade up to someone you thought had more money? The really funny part is, Bridger makes less than 5% of what I do, so even your gold digging was incompetent." Someone nearby stifled a laugh, quickly disguised as a cough. Bridger mumbled something about needing to be somewhere else and disappeared into the crowd so fast he was practically running. Thessaly reached for me, her hands grasping at my jacket, tears streaming down her face now. "Please," she begged. "Please, Kestrel, I love you. I was just being stupid, trying to impress people. It didn't mean anything. I would never actually—" "But you did," I said, gently removing her hands from my jacket. You did, actually. You just didn't think I'd find out. You didn't know I'd be standing 10 feet away, listening to you describe me as something to settle for until you could find someone better. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Please, we can talk about this at home. We can work through this. 3 years, Kestrel. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It did, I said, and my voice broke slightly on the words. It meant everything to me. That's why I never told you about the money. I wanted someone who loved me for me, not for what I could buy them. And I thought that's what we had. But I was wrong. You don't love me. You've been waiting for someone better this whole time, and tonight you thought you'd found him. More tears, more apologies, but they felt hollow now. Everything felt hollow. Behind her, I could see Dashiell watching with concern. Probably wondering if he needed to intervene, if this very public meltdown was going to cause problems for the company. I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. I had this under control. Sort of. You need to leave, I told Thessaly quietly. Take a car service home. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to separate our stuff. But right now you need to go. Kestrel, please. Go, I said firmly, and something in my tone must have finally broken through because she stopped arguing. She looked around at all the people watching, seemed to finally understand the magnitude of what had just happened, what she'd destroyed. Her makeup was running, her expensive dress suddenly looking cheap and desperate in a way that had nothing to do with how much it cost. She turned and walked toward the elevator, her shoulders shaking with sobs. People stepped aside to let her pass, a path opening through the crowd like the Red Sea parting. The elevator doors closed behind her with a quiet ding that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden silence. I stood there for a moment, surrounded by co-workers and investors, feeling more exposed and vulnerable than I'd ever felt in my life. Then Dashiell was beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Bar, he said simply. Now. I let him guide me through the crowd, accepting sympathetic looks and careful pats on the back, until we reached the private bar area reserved for executives. He poured me a scotch that probably cost more than most people's car payments and pushed it into my hand. Drink, he ordered. I drank. The scotch burned going down, but it felt good. Grounding. Real. Want to talk about it? Dashiell asked after a moment. Not really, I said, but I have a feeling I should probably explain what just happened to the EVP of operations, since half the company just watched my personal life implode. He waved a hand dismissively. Personal life is personal life. Though I have to say, Kestrel, the look on Bridger's face when you walked up, that's going to be circulating in memes on the company Slack by tomorrow morning. Despite everything, I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. Probably. For what it's worth, Dashiell said more seriously, you handled that with a lot more grace than most people would have, and she wasn't worthy of you. Anyone who can't see your value without a dollar sign attached isn't worth your time. I nodded, taking another sip of scotch. Around us, the party was slowly returning to normal. People were talking again, laughing. The moment of drama passing as these things always did. Tomorrow there would be gossip. Next week it would be old news. But right now, in this moment, I felt completely adrift. The woman I'd spent 3 years with, the woman I'd been planning to propose to next month, had just revealed herself to be someone I didn't know at all. She'd been playing a part this whole time, waiting for her real chance, her real prize. And I'd been too blind to see it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Thessaly. I'm home. Please come home so we can talk. I love you. This was all a horrible mistake. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. She'd said everything that mattered back there, when she thought I couldn't hear, when she thought she was talking to someone more important, more worthy of her time and attention. Another text came through almost immediately. "Kestrel, please. I can explain everything. What you heard, it wasn't what it sounded like. Please just come home." I turned my phone off and slipped it back into my pocket. "Another drink?" Dashiell asked, and I nodded. As he poured, I found myself looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Thessaly was probably crying in our apartment, probably already crafting her explanations and justifications. And somewhere out there was the life I'd thought I was building with her, shattered into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. But standing there in that expensive suit, surrounded by people who knew my worth both professionally and personally, holding a glass of scotch that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month, I realized something. I'd been hiding. Not just my wealth, but myself. I'd been so afraid of being wanted for the wrong reasons that I'd made it impossible for anyone to want me for the right ones. Thessaly was wrong about a lot of things. But maybe she was right about one thing. I had been coasting. Not in my career, where I'd built something remarkable, but in my personal life. I'd settled for someone who accepted my fake version of mediocrity because I was too scared to find out if anyone would love the real me. Well, now I knew. And it hurt like hell. But at least it was real. The night was far from over, and I had a feeling the fallout from this disaster was just beginning. Thessaly wasn't the type to go quietly. And I'd just publicly humiliated her in front of Seattle's tech elite. There would be consequences. There would be drama. There would be complications I couldn't even imagine yet. But right now, in this moment, surrounded by people who actually knew me, who valued me for what I contributed and who I was, I felt something unexpected starting to build beneath the hurt and betrayal. I felt free. And that scared me almost as much as everything else. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't bring myself to face the apartment, the shared space that suddenly felt contaminated by lies I hadn't even known were being told. Instead, I checked into a suite at the Cascade, just floors below where my relationship had detonated like a carefully planted bomb. Dashiell had offered his guest room, but I needed to be alone. Needed space to think, to process, to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. The suite was obscenely luxurious, all marble and soft lighting and a bed that could sleep 4 people comfortably. I stood at the window for a long time, still in my suit, watching the city lights blur and shimmer as exhaustion finally caught up with the adrenaline. My phone, which I'd turned back on in a moment of weakness, had exploded with messages. 63 texts from Thessaly. Each one more desperate than the last. 17 missed calls. 4 voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. There were other messages, too. Marlo, my assistant, asking if I was okay and if I needed anything. Bridger, apologizing profusely for the entire situation even though none of it was his fault. Even a few from colleagues I barely knew outside of quarterly meetings, offering support or condolences, or, in one case, congratulations for dodging a bullet. That one made me laugh, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty suite. I finally fell asleep around 4 in the morning, still in my clothes, sprawled across that enormous bed. My dreams were fragmented and unsettling. Thessaly's face, laughing at me, her voice saying, "Mid-level manager," over and over like a mantra. The sound of the elevator doors closing. Final and irrevocable. I woke to pounding on the door at 7:30. For a disoriented moment, I thought it might be Thessaly, that she'd somehow tracked me down. But when I opened the door, I found Marlo standing there with 2 large coffees and a bag from the bakery across the street. "You look terrible," she said matter-of-factly, pushing past me into the suite. She was in her mid-40s, efficient and unflappable, and had been my assistant for 3 years. She'd seen me through product launches, board presentations, and one memorable incident involving a malfunctioning AI prototype that nearly set the office on fire. But she'd never seen me like this. "Thanks," I muttered, taking one of the coffees. It was exactly how I liked it. 3 shots of espresso with a splash of cream. "How did you know I was here?" "I'm your assistant. It's my job to know things." She settled into one of the suite's armchairs and fixed me with a look that was part concern, part no-nonsense practicality. "Also," Dashiell told me, "he's worried about you. We all are." I sank onto the couch, the coffee warming my hands. "It's fine. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're wearing the same suit from last night, you clearly haven't slept properly, and you're hiding in a hotel room instead of dealing with the situation." She paused, her expression softening slightly. Which is completely understandable, by the way. What happened last night was brutal. "You heard?" "Everyone heard. It's all over the company. There's even a betting pool about whether you'll take her back." I looked up sharply. "What?" Marlo waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry, I shut it down. Told them it was inappropriate and unprofessional. But Kestrel, you need to understand something. This isn't going to go away quietly. Thessaly isn't going to go away quietly." As if on cue, my phone rang. Thessaly's name lit up the screen. I declined the call and set the phone face down on the coffee table. "That's the 48th call since last night," I said quietly, not counting the texts. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble that had grown overnight. "I know what I should do. Pack up her stuff, change the locks, move on. But 3 years, Marlo. 3 years of thinking I knew someone, thinking we were building something real together. How do I just walk away from that?" "She already walked away," Marlo said gently. "You just didn't know it until last night." She'd been walking away probably for a while, maybe the whole time. You just happened to catch her mid-stride. The words hit harder than they should have, because I knew she was right. Looking back now with clearer eyes, I could see the signs. The way Thessaly's interest always perked up when I mentioned a co-worker's promotion or success. How she'd steer conversations toward money and status at dinner parties. The slight disappointment in her eyes whenever I came home from work, as if she'd been hoping I'd walk through the door and announce I'd suddenly become CEO. "I was going to propose," I admitted. "Next month. I had a ring picked out and everything. Vintage emerald cut, Art Deco setting, her grandmother's birthstone. I thought she'd love it." Marlo's face softened even more. "Oh, Kestrel." "I thought she loved me," I continued, and my voice cracked on the words. "The real me. The person I am when I'm not at work, not being Executive Vice President Thorne. Just Kestrel. The guy who can't cook to save his life and watches too many documentaries and still sleeps with a fan on even in winter. I thought that was enough for her." "It should have been," Marlo said firmly. "You are enough, more than enough, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you." My phone rang again. Declined again. A moment later, a text came through. "Please, Kestrel, I'm begging you. Just let me explain. What you heard wasn't the real me. I was drunk and trying to fit in, and I said stupid things. You know me. You know I would never mean any of that. Please just come home so we can talk. I love you so much. Please don't throw away 3 years over one mistake." I showed the text to Marlo. She read it, her lips pressing into a thin line. "One mistake," she repeated. "She's calling it one mistake." "Maybe it was," I said, though I didn't believe it. Maybe she really was just drunk and saying stupid things. "Kestrel." Marlo leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I've known you for 3 years. I've seen you make decisions worth millions of dollars. I've watched you negotiate with some of the toughest investors in the business. You're brilliant and capable, and you don't take crap from anyone in the boardroom. So why are you taking it in your personal life? Because it's different, I said helplessly. Business is straightforward. Numbers don't lie. People do, but their numbers tell the truth eventually. But this? Relationships? Love? How do you quantify that? How do you run an analysis on whether someone's apology is genuine or just damage control? You listen to your gut, Marlowe said. What's your gut telling you right now? I closed my eyes, trying to sort through the tangled mess of emotions, hurt, betrayal, anger, sadness. But underneath all of that, something else. Something that had been there before last night, but that I'd been ignoring. A growing sense of incompatibility, of two people moving in different directions at different speeds. I'd felt it but pushed it aside because I'd been comfortable, because 3 years was a long time, because starting over seemed harder than staying put. My gut is telling me that if I go back to that apartment, if I listen to her explanations and accept her apologies, I'll be settling, I said finally. Just like she was settling for me, we'd both be settling, and that's no way to live. Marlowe nodded slowly. So what's your next move? Before I could answer, my phone rang again. But this time it wasn't Thessaly. It was my building manager, Caspian Hughes. Mr. Thorne, he said when I answered, his voice strained. I'm very sorry to bother you, but we have a situation at your apartment. Your girlfriend, Miss Thessaly, she's been calling the office repeatedly this morning. She's locked out and is claiming you changed the locks on her. I didn't change any locks, I said, confused. I explained that to her, sir, but she's quite insistent. She's threatening to call the police, saying you've illegally evicted her. I told her that's not how evictions work, but she's not listening. She's in the lobby right now. And she's causing quite a scene. Other residents are complaining. I looked at Marlowe, who had clearly heard everything. She mouthed the word "go" and gestured towards the bathroom. I nodded. I'll be there in 45 minutes, I told Caspian. Can you keep her in the lobby until then? Don't let her go up to the apartment. I'll do my best, sir, but she's very upset. She's crying and making quite a spectacle. It's uncomfortable for everyone. I understand. I'm on my way. I ended the call and headed for the shower, Marlowe calling after me. Want me to come with you? No, I called back. But can you do me a favor? Contact a moving company. The expensive kind that can pack and move someone's entire life in one day. I want Thessaly's things out of my apartment by tonight. On it, Marlowe said, and I heard her already making calls as I closed the bathroom door. The shower was scalding hot, and I stood under the spray longer than necessary, trying to wash away the feeling of exposure and vulnerability that had settled into my bones. By the time I emerged, Marlowe had a moving company scheduled for 3 that afternoon, and had also arranged for a locksmith to change the apartment locks at 2. I'm thorough, she said with a slight smile. Also, I took the liberty of texting Thessaly from your phone. Told her you'd meet her at the apartment at 1 o'clock. That gives the locksmith time to finish before she arrives. Marlowe, you're terrifying, I said. But I was grateful. I didn't have the energy for strategic planning right now. I just needed to get through this day. I changed into fresh clothes that Marlowe had somehow procured from somewhere, and we headed down to the lobby together. She'd called for my car to be brought around, the one I actually drove when I wasn't pretending to be a struggling mid-level manager. A Mercedes S-Class, understated but undeniably expensive. As we waited for it, Marlowe turned to me. Are you sure you want to do this today? She asked. You could wait. Give yourself time to think. If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it, I admitted. I'll start second-guessing everything. Was it really that bad? Was I overreacting? Should I give her another chance? Better to act while I still have clarity. The car arrived, and I drove across the city in a daze, my mind simultaneously racing and completely blank. The morning traffic was heavy, giving me too much time to think. 3 years. We'd been happy, hadn't we? There had been good times, lazy Sunday mornings, inside jokes, the way she'd curl up against me while we watched movies, her head on my chest, my fingers running through her hair. But had any of it been real? Or had she been acting the whole time, playing the role of the supportive girlfriend while secretly cataloging my inadequacies, measuring me against some invisible standard I could never meet without the money she didn't know I had? I pulled into the underground parking garage of my building at 12:45. The locksmith was just finishing up, installing a new deadbolt that would keep Thessaly out permanently. He handed me the new keys with a sympathetic look that suggested he'd done this kind of job before, that he knew the score. "All set, Mr. Thorne," he said. "She won't be getting in without your permission." I paid him in cash, tipped him extra, and headed up to my apartment. Our apartment. No, my apartment now. I needed to stop thinking of it as ours. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it yesterday morning. Coffee cups in the sink, a throw blanket bunched up on the couch, Thessaly's magazines scattered across the coffee table. But it all felt different now, tainted by knowledge I couldn't unknow. I started going through her things mechanically, sorting what was hers from what was mine. It was surprisingly easy. We'd kept our lives relatively separate despite living together. Separate bank accounts, separate credit cards. We'd split everything down the middle, 50-50, because I'd insisted on it. Because I didn't want her to feel like she owed me anything. Because I'd wanted us to be equals. The irony wasn't lost on me now. At exactly 1 o'clock, the building intercom buzzed. Caspian's voice came through, apologetic and strained. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Thessaly is here. Should I send her up?" "Yes," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, emotionless. "Send her up." I waited by the door, arms crossed, trying to steel myself for whatever was coming. I heard the elevator ding, heard footsteps in the hallway. Then she was there, key in hand, trying to unlock a door that no longer recognized her key. "Kestrel?" she called through the door, her voice muffled and uncertain. "Kestrel, my key isn't working. Can you let me in?" I opened the door, and the sight of her hit me harder than I'd expected. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying. Her hair unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts, and there was something so vulnerable about her appearance that I almost softened. Almost. "You changed the locks," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I changed the locks," I confirmed. "But this is my home too. You can't just lock me out, that's illegal." "You're not on the lease," I said quietly. "You never have been. This is my apartment. I've been letting you live here. But that's done now." Something flickered across her face. Shock, maybe, that I'd been paying for everything this whole time without her realizing it. That even this, even the roof over her head, had been part of the life I'd provided that she'd dismissed as insufficient. "Kestrel, please," she said, tears starting to fall again. "Can I at least come in? Can we talk about this?" I stepped aside and let her in, but I didn't close the door all the way. Didn't want to be alone with her. Didn't trust myself not to break down if this went on too long. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. "I've been trying to call you," she said. "All night, all morning. Why won't you talk to me?" "Because there's nothing to talk about," I said. "You made your feelings very clear last night. You think I'm mediocre. You think I have no ambition. You're only with me until something better comes along. What part of that needs further discussion?" "I was drunk," she said desperately. "I was trying to impress that guy because I thought he was important. I didn't mean any of it. You have to believe me." "But you did mean it," I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. Maybe not in that exact moment, maybe not with those exact words. But that's how you really feel. I could see it in your eyes last night before you even knew I was there. The hunger, the calculation. You were looking at Bridger like he was a prize you wanted to win. "That's not fair," she protested. "Everyone looks at successful people like that at networking events. That's what networking is. I was just playing the game." "By throwing me under the bus?" I shook my head. "By telling a stranger that you're only with me temporarily? That I'm a placeholder until you find someone better? That's not networking, Thessaly. That's betrayal." She was crying harder now, mascara running down her face, even though she clearly hadn't put on any fresh makeup that morning. "I love you," she sobbed. "I know I screwed up. I know I said terrible things. But I love you, Kestrel. 3 years. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It did," I said, and my voice finally broke. "It counted for everything. That's why this hurts so much. Because I loved you too. I loved you enough to keep my success hidden because I wanted to know you loved me for me. And now I know you didn't. You couldn't have. Because if you did, you never would have been looking for someone better." "But I wasn't really looking," she insisted. "I was just talking, just making conversation. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," I countered, "because it showed me who you really are, not the person you are with me when you're trying to make the relationship work, but the person you are when you think no one's watching, when you think you've found a better opportunity. And that person? She doesn't love me. She loves the idea of someone who can give her a certain lifestyle." Thessaly looked around the apartment again, and I could see her brain working, adding things up. The rent in this building wasn't cheap. The furniture, which I'd always claimed came from various thrift stores, was actually from high-end designers. The art on the walls, the appliances, everything. "How much money do you really have?" she asked suddenly. And there it was, the question that mattered most to her. "Enough," I said. "More than enough. But that's not the point." "It is the point," she burst out, her sadness shifting rapidly to anger. "You lied to me. For 3 years you let me think we were struggling, that we had to budget and save and be careful. And the whole time you were secretly rich?" "How is that not lying?" "I never lied," I said firmly. "I just didn't advertise. I drove a normal car and wore normal clothes and lived a normal life because I wanted to be with someone who loved me for who I am, not what I have. And you know what? It worked. I found out exactly what you thought of me when you believed I had nothing. You thought I was mediocre, unambitious, a stepping stone." "That's not fair," she said again, but her voice was weaker now. "You manipulated the situation. You set me up to fail." "I gave you the chance to love me without the distraction of money," I corrected. "And you couldn't do it. That's not on me, Thessaly. That's on you." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years and all their accumulated lies hanging between us like smoke. Finally, she wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "So what now?" she asked. "You're just going to kick me out? Throw me away like I mean nothing?" "I've hired a moving company," I said. "They'll be here at 3 to pack your things. You can supervise if you want, or you can leave and let them handle it. Either way, everything will be boxed up and moved to a storage unit by tonight. I'll pay for the first 3 months of storage. After that, it's your responsibility." "Where am I supposed to go?" "You have friends, you have family, you have a job that pays well enough to get you an apartment. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful when you want to be." The anger flashed in her eyes again. "You're really going to do this? After everything we've been through? After 3 years together?" "You did this," I said quietly. "Last night. At that party, you did this. I'm just responding to what you showed me was already true. We were already over. I just didn't know it yet." She opened her mouth to argue more, but I held up a hand. "I'm done, Thessaly. We're done. The movers will be here soon. You can stay and help them pack, or you can leave. But either way, this conversation is over." For a moment, I thought she might keep fighting. But something in my face must have finally convinced her that this was real, that there was no walking it back. She looked around the apartment one more time, her eyes lingering on photos of us scattered on shelves and walls. Photos I'd have to take down later. Memories I'd have to pack away. "I really did love you," she said softly. "Maybe not the way you wanted. Maybe not enough. But I did love you, Kestrel." "I believe you," I said. And I meant it. In your own way, you probably did. But it wasn't the kind of love that could survive reality. It was love with conditions and asterisks and expiration dates. And I deserve better than that. She nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. Then she grabbed her purse from the hook by the door and walked out without another word. I listened to her footsteps fade down the hallway, listened to the elevator doors open and close. Only then did I close the apartment door, the new lock clicking into place with a sound that felt devastatingly final. I sank onto the couch and put my head in my hands. The apartment felt too big suddenly, too quiet. All the spaces Thessaly had occupied, all the routines we'd built together, they were just empty now. Voids I'd have to learn to fill or live with. My phone buzzed. A text from Marlowe. "How are you holding up?" I typed back. "I've been better, but I'll survive." "Want me to come over after the movers leave?" I thought about it, then declined. I needed to be alone, to sit with this grief and process it, to figure out who Kestrel Thorne was without Thessaly in his life. The movers arrived at 3 on the dot, professional and efficient. They packed up 3 years of her life in boxes and garment bags in just under 4 hours. I watched them work, occasionally answering questions about what belonged to whom. But mostly I just sat on the couch and felt the weight of it all. By 7 that evening, every trace of Thessaly was gone. The apartment looked sparse, half empty. Whole sections of closet space were vacant. The medicine cabinet in the bathroom had gaps where her products used to be. The bookshelf was missing all her novels and self-help books. It was like she'd been erased, like the past 3 years had been nothing but a dream. But she had been real. We had been real, even if it hadn't been what I thought it was. And now I had to figure out how to move forward from this, how to rebuild my life with this new knowledge about people, and trust, and the risks of love. I stood at the window as night fell over Seattle, watching the lights come on across the city. Somewhere out there, Thessaly was probably telling her version of this story to sympathetic friends, painting herself as the victim, the woman wronged by a man who'd hidden his success. And maybe she was a victim, in a way. Victim of her own values, her own priorities, her own inability to see what really mattered. But I was a victim too. Victim of my own naivete, thinking I could hide from the complications money brought while still living an authentic life. You can't control how people see you by controlling what they know about you. Sooner or later, the truth comes out. And when it does, you find out what people are really made of. My phone buzzed again. Another text, but not from anyone I expected. It was from Bridger. "Sir, I want to apologize again for last night. I had no idea she was your girlfriend. If I'd known, I never would have engaged in conversation with her. I hope this doesn't affect my position at the company. I've also prepared a formal statement for HR if needed." I stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back, "You have nothing to apologize for. You did nothing wrong. This situation is not on you, and it absolutely won't affect your position. In fact, I owe you a thank you. If you hadn't been who you were, I might never have heard the truth." His response came quickly. "Thank you, sir. That's very gracious of you. For what it's worth, I think you handled an impossible situation with remarkable dignity. And if you ever need anything, I'm here." It was a kind gesture from someone who'd been caught in the crossfire of my imploding relationship. I appreciated it more than I could express in a text message. As darkness fully settled over the city, I made myself dinner from what little food was left in the apartment. Thessaly had done most of the grocery shopping, another small thing I hadn't realized I'd been taking for granted. The refrigerator was nearly empty, so I ended up making scrambled eggs and toast, eating alone at a table that had been built for two. This was my life now. Starting over at 32, single again after thinking I'd found my person. It felt surreal and terrifying and, underneath it all, strangely liberating. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't known was there, and someone had finally lifted it from my shoulders. My phone rang. This time it was Dashiell. "Checking in," he said when I answered. "Making sure you're still alive." "Barely," I said, but there was dark humor in my voice. "Thessaly's stuff is out. Locks are changed. I'm officially single again." "How do you feel?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but also like maybe I needed to be hit by a truck to wake me up. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Dashiell said. "Listen, take Monday off. Hell, take the whole week if you need it. The division won't fall apart without you for a few days." "I'll be there Monday," I said firmly. "I need the distraction. Need to focus on something other than this disaster." "If you're sure." "I'm sure." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, just two colleagues who'd become friends checking in on each other. After we hung up, I found myself looking at the photos I still hadn't taken down. Thessaly and me at Pike Place Market, at a Mariners game, on a hiking trip to the Cascades. We looked happy in those photos, genuinely happy. Had it all been fake? Or had there been real moments mixed in with the performance? I'd probably never know for sure. And maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that when the moment of truth came, when she thought she'd found something better, she'd shown her true self. And that true self didn't include loving me for who I was. I spent the rest of the evening taking down photos, packing them away in a box I shoved in the back of my closet. Out of sight, but not quite ready to throw away. Maybe someday I'd be able to look at them without feeling this crushing weight in my chest. But that day wasn't today. By 11, I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the space next to me conspicuously empty, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out what came next. Tomorrow I'd begin rebuilding. But tonight, I just let myself feel it all. The hurt, the betrayal, the grief for something that had never been quite real, but had felt real enough to build a life around. My phone buzzed one last time. One final text from Thessaly. "I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday you'll understand that I did love you, just not in the way you needed. I'm sorry I wasn't who you thought I was. I'm sorry I wasn't enough." I read the message 3 times, looking for any trace of genuine remorse or understanding. But all I saw were more excuses, more explanations, more attempts to reframe her actions as something other than what they were. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number, deleted the message, and put my phone on the nightstand. That chapter of my life was closed now. What came next was up to me to write. And as I finally drifted off to sleep, I realized that despite everything, despite the pain and the betrayal and the loneliness already creeping in around the edges, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like myself again. The real me, not the version I'd been performing for someone who could never appreciate it. And maybe that was worth the price of a broken heart. Monday morning arrived with the kind of Seattle rain that felt personal, like the sky itself was mourning alongside me. I stood in front of my closet at 6 a.m., staring at the rows of suits I actually wore to work, the expensive ones I'd kept hidden from Thessaly. For 3 years, I'd left the apartment in my regular guy clothes and changed in my private office. Now there was no reason to hide anymore. no one to deceive, no one to protect from the truth of who I really was. I selected a charcoal Tom Ford suit, Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a watch I'd bought myself after closing a particularly lucrative deal last year. As I knotted my tie in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back. Not because I looked different, but because for the first time in years, the person in the reflection matched the person everyone at work knew me to be. The drive to Arcturus headquarters took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. I'd sold the Honda over the weekend in a fit of symbolic purging and was driving the Mercedes full-time now. No more pretending. No more hiding. Just me in all my complicated, successful, emotionally devastated glory. Marlo was already at her desk when I arrived. Coffee ready? Schedule organized? A thin folder marked "Personal Matter" sitting prominently in the center of my desk. "You look almost human," she observed as I passed. "I'm working on it," I said, grabbing the coffee and heading into my office. The folder contained what I'd requested, a complete financial separation plan. Marlo had been thorough, as always. Every shared account closed. Every bill transferred solely to my name. Every connection between Thessaly and me severed cleanly. There was also a brief report from the moving company confirming that all of her belongings were now in Storage Unit 42 at Public Storage on Capitol Hill, paid through January. I was reviewing the documents when my office door burst open without warning. Dashiell strode in, followed by two people I didn't immediately recognize. They looked serious, official, and my stomach dropped. "Kestrel," Dashiell said, his face grim. "We have a problem." The woman stepped forward first. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, wearing a navy suit that screamed legal authority. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Petra Blackwood, head of legal affairs for Arcturus. This is Quinlan Morris from HR. We need to discuss a situation that's developed over the weekend." My mind raced through possibilities. Had Thessaly done something? Filed some kind of complaint? But what grounds would she have? "What situation?" I asked, gesturing for them to sit. Petra opened her briefcase and pulled out her laptop, turning it to face me. On the screen was a blog post published on a popular Seattle gossip and news site called Emerald City Secrets. The headline made my blood run cold. Tech executive's secret life exposed. How Kestrel Thorne manipulated his girlfriend for years. "What the hell is this?" I breathed, scanning the article. It was written anonymously, but I recognized Thessaly's voice in every word. She'd laid out our entire relationship, painting herself as the victim of an elaborate psychological manipulation. According to her version, I'd deliberately hidden my wealth and status to test her, to keep her dependent and under my control. She claimed I'd gaslit her about our financial situation, made her feel guilty for wanting nice things, and then publicly humiliated her when she'd tried to network at a professional event. The worst part was how believable it sounded. She'd taken genuine elements of our relationship and twisted them just enough to make me look like a calculating sociopath. "She's made you look like a villain," Quinlan said quietly. "And it's getting traction. The post has been shared 8,000 times since it went up Saturday night. There are think pieces being written about power dynamics in relationships. You're becoming a cautionary tale about wealthy men who manipulate women." I felt like I was going to be sick. "But that's not what happened. I wasn't trying to manipulate her. I just wanted someone who loved me for me." "I believe you," Petra said. "But perception is reality in cases like this. And right now the perception is very bad. We're getting calls from journalists. Someone even reached out to the board asking for comment on whether Arcturus employs executives who engage in psychological abuse." "Psychological abuse?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I didn't abuse her. I overheard her telling someone she was only with me until she could trade up, and I ended the relationship. That's not abuse, that's self-respect." We know, Dashiell interjected. And for what it's worth, everyone who was at that party knows the truth. But those people aren't the ones reading this blog and sharing it on social media. The public doesn't know what really happened. They're just reading her version, and her version is compelling. I read more of the article, each paragraph worse than the last. She'd included details that only someone who'd lived with me would know. The fact that I insisted on splitting everything 50-50, how I'd discouraged her from expensive purchases, the way I'd kept my work life separate from our home life. All of it factual, all of it presented in the worst possible light. There's more, Petra said grimly. She's hired a lawyer, Ambrose Castellan. You know who that is? I did. Everyone in Seattle's business community knew Ambrose Castellan. He was a shark who specialized in high-profile cases, particularly those involving wealthy defendants and sympathetic plaintiffs. He'd made his career destroying powerful men's reputations and extracting massive settlements. What's she suing me for? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional harm, and fraudulent misrepresentation in a domestic partnership, Petra read from her notes. She's claiming that by hiding your wealth and status, you entered into the relationship under false pretenses. She's also claiming that the public humiliation at the party constituted intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's insane, I said. She's the one who was trying to cheat on me. Technically, she was just flirting, Quinlan pointed out carefully, which, while morally questionable, isn't legally actionable. What is legally actionable, or at least what Castellan is going to argue, is that you created a false financial reality that prevented her from making informed decisions about her life. I stood up, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through my body. This is unbelievable. I'm being punished for not flaunting my money, for wanting an honest relationship? You're being punished for having money and for being male in a cultural moment where wealthy men are automatically suspect, Petra said bluntly. Fair or not, that's the reality. Castellan knows this, and he's going to play it for everything it's worth. So what do I do? Petra closed her laptop and looked at me directly. You have 3 options. 1, settle quietly. Pay her whatever she's asking, and make this go away with a non-disclosure agreement. 2, fight publicly. Tell your side of the story. Hope the truth wins out. 3, fight privately through the legal system. Let it play out in court. Risk a trial that could drag on for years and cost millions. What's she asking for? I asked. $2 million, Petra said, plus a public apology. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the office. $2 million because I broke up with her after she said she was only with me until she could find someone richer? And she wants me to apologize? Welcome to modern litigation, Petra said dryly. Logic isn't always the primary consideration. What do you recommend? I asked. Petra exchanged glances with Dashiell. Professionally, settle. Make it go away. $2 million is nothing to you, and the continued publicity will be far more costly in the long run, both financially and personally. But personally? She paused. If someone did this to me, I'd fight. Not because I'd necessarily win, but because sometimes principle matters more than pragmatism. The company will support you either way, Dashiell added. But you need to know that if you fight, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Castellan will dig into every aspect of your life. Past relationships, financial records, private conversations. He'll look for anything he can use to paint you as the bad guy. Let him look, I said, anger finally overtaking the shock. I've got nothing to hide. Unlike Thessaly, I didn't lie about who I was. I just didn't advertise it. Then you're fighting, Petra said. It wasn't a question. I'm fighting. She nodded approvingly. Good. Then we need to get ahead of this story. You're going to need a PR firm, someone who specializes in reputation management. I have a contact at Morrison & Vail. They handled the Ravencroft scandal last year, turned a disaster into a redemption story. Set it up, I said. After they left, I sat alone in my office, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. 24 hours ago, I'd thought the worst was over. I'd ended a bad relationship, cut my losses, started moving on. But Thessaly wasn't done. She was going to make me pay for having the audacity to end things, for daring to call her out on her behavior. My phone rang. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Thorne. A smooth, cultured voice, male, confident. This is Ambrose Castellan. I represent Thessaly Winters in her civil action against you. I have lawyers, I said curtly. Direct all communication through them. Of course, of course. But I wanted to reach out personally, man to man. This doesn't have to get ugly, Kestrel. May I call you Kestrel? No. A slight laugh. Mr. Thorne, then. My client simply wants to be made whole. She invested 3 years of her life into a relationship based on what she believed to be mutual honesty and transparency. You violated that trust by concealing material facts about your financial situation. That concealment prevented her from making informed decisions about her future. Surely you can understand how that's actionable. She was only with me until she could find someone richer, I said flatly. I have witnesses who heard her say it, including one of my employees who she was actively hitting on at the time. Ah, yes, the party incident. Castellan's tone shifted slightly, became more predatory. Let's talk about that. You deliberately brought her to an event where you knew you'd be revealed as someone she didn't know. You set her up for public humiliation in front of your colleagues and subordinates. That's textbook intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's textbook accountability, I countered. I took her to a company event and she chose to throw me under the bus while trying to pick up another man. The only person who humiliated her was herself. Your perspective is noted, but juries tend to be sympathetic to women who've been deceived by wealthy men. The power dynamic alone creates a presumption of impropriety. Add in the public humiliation factor, and you're looking at significant exposure. My client is being very reasonable with her settlement demand. I'd encourage you to seriously consider it. Tell your client that if she wants to play this game, we'll play. But she's not getting a dime from me, and she's definitely not getting an apology. Silence on the other end. Then, Mr. Thorne, I've handled hundreds of cases like this. I know how they end. The wealthy man thinks he can outlast, outspend, outlawyer his way to victory. But the longer this drags on, the more dirt comes out. Past girlfriends, business dealings, everything becomes fair game. And in the court of public opinion, you're already losing. Then I guess I'll lose, I said. Goodbye, Mr. Castellan. I hung up before he could respond, my hand shaking slightly. This was really happening. Thessaly wasn't just walking away. She was weaponizing our relationship, turning our breakup into a payday. Marlowe appeared in my doorway. The PR firm can see you at 2. Also, you have 17 interview requests from journalists. What do you want me to tell them? Tell them no comment for now. The PR firm will handle media strategy going forward. She nodded, but didn't leave. Kestrel, can I say something? Off the record? Always. This is going to be terrible. It's going to be invasive and exhausting and infuriating. But you're doing the right thing. Sometimes the right thing costs more than settling would. But it's still right. Thanks, Marlowe. Also, she added with a slight smile, the betting pool is back. Current odds are 3-1 in your favor to win the lawsuit. I may have contributed to that pool. Despite everything, I laughed. You bet on me? Always. The rest of the morning was a blur of damage control meetings. The PR firm, Morrison & Vale, sent their best crisis manager. Her name was Octavia Penn, and she was a force of nature. 50 years old, ruthlessly efficient, with a reputation for turning disasters into triumphs through sheer strategic brilliance. First things first, she said. spreading documents across my conference table. We need to control the narrative. Right now, Thessaly's version is the only version. We need to get yours out there. I don't want to air our personal business publicly, I objected. Too late. She already did that. Now you either let her story stand unchallenged or you provide context. Those are your only options. What do you recommend? A carefully crafted statement. Not defensive, not attacking, just facts, presented clearly and sympathetically. We acknowledge that relationships are complicated. We express regret that things ended badly, but we firmly establish that you acted with integrity throughout, and that her claims of manipulation are unfounded. Will that work? It's a start, but we'll also need to be strategic about media appearances, interviews with sympathetic journalists, maybe a longer piece in a respected publication where you can tell your story in depth. And we need testimonials from people who know you, who can speak to your character. I'm not dragging my friends and colleagues into this. Octavia fixed me with a look that suggested she'd dealt with stubborn clients before. Mr. Thorne, your friends and colleagues are already in this. That blog post has made them part of the story. Better to have them speak up in your defense than to let Castellan track them down and twist their words. She was right. And I hated it. This thing was metastasizing, spreading beyond just Thessaly and me, pulling in everyone around us. Fine, I said. Do what you need to do. Over the next few hours, Octavia crafted a statement. It was measured, dignified, and firmly rebutted Thessaly's claims without descending into mudslinging. We released it through official channels at 4 p.m., just in time for the evening news cycle. My phone exploded. Texts from friends I hadn't heard from in years. Messages of support from colleagues. Even a few from ex-girlfriends expressing shock at Thessaly's claims and offering to speak on my behalf if needed. The response was overwhelming and, despite everything, deeply moving. But there were other messages, too. Anonymous emails calling me a manipulator, a gaslighter. A typical rich man who thought he could buy his way out of accountability. Social media was even worse. The blog post had sparked a firestorm of debate about power dynamics in relationships, and I'd become the poster child for everything wrong with wealthy men. By 6 p.m., I was exhausted. I told Marlo to hold all calls and sat in my office, looking out at the Seattle skyline as the sun set behind the Olympics. Somewhere out there, Thessaly was probably celebrating this chaos. Or maybe she was just as miserable as I was, trapped in a situation that had spiraled beyond either of our control. My personal phone rang. My mother. I'd been dreading this call. Kestrel Isaac Thorne, she said when I answered, using my middle name the way she always did when she was upset. Why am I learning about your breakup from the internet? Hi. Mom. Don't hi mom me. I just spent my entire afternoon fielding calls from relatives asking if my son is some kind of monster who manipulates women. Care to explain? I gave her the abbreviated version, leaving out the most painful details. She listened without interrupting, which meant she was either very angry or very worried. Possibly both. That girl always was too focused on material things, she said finally. I tried to tell you, but you were so smitten. You never said anything. A mother knows when to speak and when to let her son learn his own lessons, though I'll admit I didn't expect the lesson to be quite this expensive or public. It's going to get worse before it gets better, I warned her. Then we'll deal with it. You're a thorn. We don't run from fights, especially when we're in the right. Your father would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. My father had died 5 years ago, a heart attack at 62. He'd been a high school teacher, the kind who inspired students and lived modestly despite my mother's successful real estate career. He'd taught me that character mattered more than cash, that how you treated people defined you more than any job title. I miss him, I said quietly. So do I, sweetheart. But he's watching, and he'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. Hold your head high. Tell the truth. And don't let anyone make you ashamed of who you are or what you've accomplished. After we hung up, I felt marginally better. Family had a way of putting things in perspective, of reminding you that your worth wasn't determined by what strangers on the internet thought. I was packing up to finally go home when Bridger appeared at my door, looking nervous. "Sir, do you have a minute?" "Of course, come in." He sat across from me, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard about the lawsuit, about the blog post. I wanted you to know that I've already spoken to Ms. Blackwood in legal. I've given a formal statement about what happened at the party. Everything I heard, everything I saw, I'll testify if it comes to that." "You don't have to do that, Bridger. This isn't your fight." "With respect, sir, it kind of is. She was using me to hurt you. I was just too dumb to realize it at the time. And besides, what she's saying about you isn't true. Everyone who works for you knows that. You're tough but fair. You expect excellence, but you reward it. You've never manipulated anyone. If anything, you give people too much benefit of the doubt." "Is that a professional assessment?" I asked with a slight smile. "It's a personal one, from someone who's watched you mentor analysts who had no business being in the room yet. Who've seen you take responsibility for failures that weren't your fault? Who knows you spent 3 hours last month helping me debug a financial model at 8 o'clock at night, even though you had a board meeting at 6 a.m. the next morning? That's not the behavior of a manipulator. That's the behavior of someone who actually cares about people." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you, Bridger. That means more than you know." "We've got your back, sir. All of us in the division. Whatever you need." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of my office and let myself feel it. The support. The belief. The knowledge that while Thessaly was out there trying to destroy my reputation, there were dozens of people who knew the truth and were willing to stand up for it. Maybe this fight wouldn't be as lonely as I'd feared. I finally headed home around 8, stopping for Chinese takeout because cooking for one still felt too depressing. The apartment was dark and empty, a stark reminder of how much my life had changed in just a few days. But it was also mine, completely mine, without the weight of someone else's resentment and ambition pressing down on every surface. I ate dinner standing at the window, watching the city lights, thinking about everything that had happened, and everything still to come. The lawsuit would probably take months, maybe years. The public scrutiny would be relentless. My privacy was gone. My relationship had become tabloid fodder. Everything I'd tried to avoid by keeping my success quiet had happened anyway, just in the worst possible way. But underneath the stress and anger and hurt, I felt something else. Something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because whatever happened next, at least it would be real. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more wondering if people loved me for who I was or what I had. Everyone knew everything now. And the people who stuck around, who believed in me, who stood by me through this disaster, those would be the real ones. The ones worth keeping. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won something by refusing to settle. But this is just beginning. By the time I'm done, everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are. Sleep well. Kestrel." I didn't need to ask who it was from. The malice was pure Thessaly. I blocked the number, deleted the message, and poured myself a scotch. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. But it would be a war fought in courtrooms and public statements, with lawyers and PR firms and testimony under oath. And somewhere in the midst of all that fighting, I'd figure out how to be myself again. The real me, without apology or explanation. The person my father raised me to be. That person was worth fighting for, even if Thessaly would never see it. 3 months. That's how long it took for the Thessaly situation to consume my life completely. 3 months of depositions, media appearances, strategic leaks, and counter-leaks. 3 months of watching strangers dissect my relationship on social media, debating whether I was a victim or a villain. 3 months of Ambrose Castellan trying to paint me as a calculating sociopath who'd orchestrated an elaborate psychological manipulation. But 3 months was also how long it took for the truth to start winning. It was early February when everything finally came to a head. Seattle was locked in one of those rare cold snaps where the city actually got snow, and the courthouse steps were treacherous as I arrived for what Petra Blackwood assured me would be a very interesting development. Castellan had pushed for an early trial date, confident that public sentiment and a sympathetic jury would net Thessaly a settlement far larger than the $2 million she'd originally demanded. But Petra had been methodical, building our case piece by piece, interview by interview, document by document. And somewhere along the way, the narrative had started to shift. It began with the witnesses from the party. Bridger's testimony was damning for Thessaly's case. Under oath, he described in precise detail how she'd approached him, touched him, disparaged me, and explicitly stated she was looking to trade up. But he wasn't the only one. Petra had tracked down 11 other Arcturus employees who'd overheard parts of the conversation or witnessed Thessaly's behavior that night. Their statements, taken together, painted a picture of calculated social climbing that even Castellan couldn't spin. Then came the character witnesses, my colleagues, friends, even 2 ex-girlfriends who testified that I'd been nothing but honest and respectful in relationships. One of them, Juniper Strand, had actually dated me in college when I had nothing. She told the court, with obvious emotion, that I was the same person rich or poor, the same person in public or private. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. Octavia Penn, my PR strategist, had done something brilliant. She'd hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt on Thessaly, but to verify everything in her blog post and lawsuit. Every claim, every incident, every detail. And what they found was a pattern. Thessaly had done this before. Not exactly the same way, but close enough. The investigator discovered 2 previous relationships with men who'd had significant wealth disparities with her. In both cases, the relationships had ended when the men discovered she'd been simultaneously pursuing wealthier prospects. And in one case, she'd attempted a settlement demand for emotional distress that the man had quietly paid to make go away. Petra was already in the courthouse conference room when I arrived, and her expression told me something significant had happened. "Castellan wants to meet," she said, without preamble. "No recording, no official record, just the 4 of us. 4. You, me, him, and Thessaly. He specifically requested she be present. Why would he want that? He's kept her away from everything so far." Petra's smile was sharp. "Because he knows what we know. And he's trying to salvage what he can before it all falls apart." The meeting took place in a small conference room with a view of Elliott Bay. Snow was still falling, coating the city in white that would be gone by tomorrow. Thessaly arrived first with Castellan, and seeing her for the first time in 3 months hit harder than I'd expected. She looked different. Thinner, older somehow. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She wore a conservative navy suit that was probably Castellan's idea, meant to make her look professional and sympathetic. But her eyes, when they met mine, held something I hadn't seen before. Not anger or calculation, something closer to fear. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Castellan began, his smooth voice filling the small room. "I thought it would be productive for all parties to discuss resolution options before we proceed further with litigation." "You mean before your case completely implodes," Petra said pleasantly. "Let's not waste time with pretense, Ambrose. You know what we found. The question is whether we reveal it publicly or you withdraw gracefully." Castellan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Petra opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Malcolm Greystone. Thessaly dated him for 18 months. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative making a comfortable but not exceptional living. Throughout their relationship, she was also seeing Desmond Price, a surgeon. When Malcolm discovered the overlap, she demanded $50,000 for emotional damages resulting from his controlling behavior. He paid. Then there's Porter Finch, investment banker, similar pattern. She pursued him while still technically with someone else, and when that relationship ended badly, she tried to leverage it into a settlement. He didn't pay, but he did sign an NDA about the situation, which is how you kept it quiet. The color had drained from Thessaly's face. She looked at Castellan, who studiously avoided her gaze. 2 data points don't establish a pattern, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. 3 does, though, Petra continued, and that's what we have here. 3 relationships where Thessaly Winters engaged in the same behavior. Pursue a man, assess his financial situation, simultaneously pursue what she perceives as a better option. Then attempt to monetize the fallout when she gets caught. It's practically a business model. That's not, Thessaly started, but Castellan put a hand on her arm. My client's past relationships have no bearing on the current case, he said. Mr. Thorne still concealed material facts about his financial situation. That concealment still prevented her from making informed decisions. Except she did make informed decisions, I said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at me. She decided I wasn't worth her time because she thought I was middle class. She decided to pursue Bridger because she thought he had more money. She decided to tell a stranger that I was just a placeholder until something better came along. Those were all informed decisions based on the information she had. The only thing she didn't know was that I was actually richer than the guy she was trying to trade me in for. And that's not concealment. That's her making bad assumptions. You deliberately created a false impression, Thessaly said, her voice breaking slightly. You lived in a regular apartment, drove a regular car. You acted like we were equals financially. We were equals, I said. Just not in the way you thought. You made your half of rent from your salary. I made mine from my salary. That's equality. The fact that I had other money I wasn't spending doesn't change that. But if you'd known, you would have stayed with me for the wrong reasons, I finished. That's the whole point. I didn't want to be loved for my money. And it turns out my instinct was right. Because the moment you thought you'd found someone with more money, you were ready to jump ship. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real ones, I thought, though with Thessaly I could never be entirely sure. I did love you, she whispered. I know you don't believe me, but I did. Not perfectly, not the way you wanted, but I loved you. The way you loved Malcolm? Petra asked, her tone cutting. The way you loved Porter? Or is Kestrel special because his bank account was bigger than you realized? That's enough, Castellan said sharply. This meeting is clearly not productive. We'll see you in court. Wait, Thessaly said, and there was something desperate in her voice. Please wait. She turned to Castellan. Can I speak to Kestrel alone? Just for 5 minutes? Absolutely not, Castellan said immediately. Anything you say to him can be used. I don't care, Thessaly interrupted. I need to talk to him. Please, 5 minutes. I looked at Petra, who shrugged slightly. It was my call. Against every instinct, every piece of legal advice, every ounce of self-preservation. I nodded. 5 minutes, I said. Petra and Castellan left reluctantly, their lawyer's instincts screaming that this was a terrible idea. The door closed behind them, and suddenly Thessaly and I were alone for the first time since that night in our apartment, when the movers had packed up her life. I'm sorry, she said immediately. For all of it. The blog post, the lawsuit, everything. I was angry and hurt, and I wanted you to hurt too. I wanted you to pay for making me feel small and stupid. So you tried to destroy my reputation and extort $2 million from me? Ambrose said we had a case. He said we could win. He made it sound reasonable, like I deserved compensation for what you'd put me through. She wiped her eyes. But hearing it all laid out like that, hearing about Malcolm and Porter, seeing it as a pattern, that's not who I thought I was. That's not who I want to be. But it is who you are, I said quietly. At least it's who you've chosen to be. 3 times now, Thessaly. 3 relationships where you've done the same thing. At what point does it stop being bad luck or poor judgment and start being who you actually are? I can change, she said desperately. I know I have problems. I know I value the wrong things, but I can work on that. I can be better. I hope you do, I said, and I meant it. I hope you figure out what really matters and find someone who can make you happy without having to be rich to do it. But that person isn't going to be me. We're done, Thessaly. We were done the moment you opened your mouth at that party. What if I drop the lawsuit? She asked. What if I withdraw everything, issue a public apology? Would you consider giving me another chance? I stared at her, genuinely shocked. You think that's what this is about? You think I'm putting you through this legal nightmare so you'll come back to me? Isn't it? No, I said firmly. This is about principle, about not letting you weaponize our relationship for profit, about making sure the truth comes out. But it was never about getting you back. That door closed permanently 3 months ago. She flinched like I'd hit her. So even if I do the right thing now, even if I fix this, we're still over? We're still over, I confirmed. Because I deserve someone who loves me consistently, not just when it's convenient or profitable, and you deserve to figure out who you are when you're not calculating the net worth of everyone around you. I really did love you, she said again, more softly this time. That part was real. Maybe not strong enough to overcome my other issues, but it was real. Then I'm sorry it wasn't enough, I said. For both of us. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes one more time. Then she stood and walked to the door. With her hand on the handle, she turned back. For what it's worth, you were right to hide your money. If I'd known from the beginning, I probably would have stayed for the wrong reasons, and you would have wasted more than 3 years on me. A sad smile. Maybe that was the one time your trust issues actually protected you. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the conference room, staring out at the snow-covered city, processing what had just happened. Petra returned a minute later. Well, what did she say? I think she's going to drop the lawsuit. You think? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm withdrawing the case. My lawyer doesn't agree, but it's my decision. I'm also taking down the blog post and issuing a retraction. I won't fight your counter-narrative. You win, Kestrel. I hope that makes you happy. I showed the text to Petra, who read it with obvious satisfaction. I'll have official confirmation within the hour. But this looks legitimate. Castellan must be furious. Probably. How do you feel? I thought about it. Empty, relieved, sad. All of it at once. That's normal after something like this. You've been in combat mode for 3 months. Now that the fight's over, all the emotions you suppressed are going to hit you at once. She was right. Over the next few days, as Thessaly officially withdrew her lawsuit and issued a public statement admitting she'd let anger cloud her judgment, I felt myself cycling through every emotion imaginable. Victory felt hollow. Vindication felt bitter. Relief was tinged with sadness for what we'd both lost and what we'd never really had. The media had a field day with Thessaly's reversal. Think pieces about false accusations and the weaponization of victimhood flooded the internet. My reputation was restored. Mostly, though there would always be people who believed the original story rather than the retraction. That was the nature of modern scandal. The accusation went viral, but the correction merely trended. Work became my refuge again. I threw myself into a new AI project, spent 14-hour days in the lab, mentored young analysts with perhaps more patience than before. Dashiell noticed, of course. "You're running," he said one evening when he found me still in the office at 9 p.m. "I'm working." "You're hiding. There's a difference." He sat across from my desk. "The lawsuit is over. You won. When are you going to actually deal with what happened?" "I am dealing with it." "By working yourself into exhaustion? That's not dealing with it. That's postponing it." "What do you want me to do, Dashiell? Go to therapy? Process my feelings?" "I'm fine. The situation is resolved. Life moves on." "Does it?" He leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're more closed off now than you were when you were actively hiding your success. At least then you engaged with people. Now you're just going through the motions." He wasn't wrong. Since the lawsuit ended, I'd declined every social invitation, every dinner, every attempt by well-meaning friends to set me up on dates. The idea of trusting someone again, of opening up, of being vulnerable, felt impossible. Thessaly had proven that people couldn't be trusted with the truth. Better to keep them at arm's length. "I need time," I said finally. "Time is fine. Isolation isn't. Just don't let what she did turn you into someone you're not. Don't let her win by making you afraid to be yourself." That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about Dashiell's words. Was I becoming someone I wasn't? Or was I finally becoming who I'd always been meant to be, just without the naivete that had let me get hurt? My phone rang. My mother, checking in as she had been every few days since the lawsuit. "How are you really doing?" she asked, cutting through my automatic. "I'm fine." "I don't know, Mom. I thought I'd feel better once it was over, but I just feel numb." "That's grief," she said gently. "You're grieving the relationship you thought you had, the person you thought she was, the future you'd imagined. That takes time to process." "How long?" "However long it takes. But Kestrel, honey, don't let this make you bitter. Don't let it make you think everyone is like Thessaly. There are good people out there. People who will love you for exactly who you are. Money or no money. How do I trust that? How do I know the next person isn't just better at hiding their real motivations?" "You don't," she admitted. "That's the risk of love. You have to trust anyway. You have to stay open anyway. Otherwise, you're letting her win. You're letting her take away your ability to connect with people. Maybe that's safer." "Safety isn't living," she said firmly. "Your father and I didn't raise you to play it safe. We raised you to be brave, to take chances, to believe in the goodness of people even when they disappoint you." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room and let myself really feel everything for the first time in months. The hurt, the betrayal, the loneliness, the fear that I'd never trust anyone again. But also, underneath all of that, something else. Something that felt like possibility. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe staying closed off was just another way of letting Thessaly win. Maybe the real victory was learning from this experience without letting it define me. My phone buzzed. A text from Bridger. "Heard the lawsuit is officially dropped. Congratulations, sir. A bunch of us from the division are going out Friday to celebrate. You should come." I stared at the text for a long moment. My first instinct was to decline, to make up some excuse about work or prior commitments. But then I thought about what that would mean. Choosing isolation over connection. Choosing safety over living. I typed back, "What time?" His response came immediately. 7 p.m. at the Walrus and Carpenter. Fair warning? We're planning to get you moderately drunk and embarrass you with toasts about what an inspiration you are. No backing out now. Despite myself, I smiled. See you there. Friday came, and I almost backed out a dozen times. But at 6:30, I found myself getting ready, putting on jeans and a casual sweater, looking more like the old version of myself than the executive vice president version. Somewhere in between the two was the real me, and maybe it was time to let that person exist without apology. The Walrus and Carpenter was packed, the Oyster Bar buzzing with Friday night energy. I spotted Bridger immediately, along with a dozen other people from my division. They'd commandeered a large table near the back, and when they saw me, a cheer went up that turned heads across the restaurant. "The man of the hour," Bridger called out, raising a glass. "We ordered you the good scotch, the really good scotch." I slid into a seat, surrounded by people who'd stood by me through the worst 3 months of my life. People who'd given statements, offered support, believed in me when half the internet thought I was a monster. My team, my people. "Speech," someone called out, and others joined in. "No speeches," I said, laughing. "But I'll say this. Thank you, all of you, for having my back when it would have been easier to distance yourselves, for telling the truth even when it was uncomfortable, for reminding me that not everyone is out for themselves." "Damn right," a woman named Vesper said. She was one of my senior analysts, brilliant and no nonsense. "Besides, we had a betting pool riding on your vindication. You made us all a lot of money." Everyone laughed. And the conversation shifted to work gossip, industry news, the kind of easy banter I'd been missing. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the version I'd performed for Thessaly, not the executive vice president version, just Kestrel. Flawed, recovering, learning to trust again. Around 9, a woman approached our table. She was about my age, dark hair, confident smile, wearing a leather jacket over a vintage band t-shirt. She looked vaguely familiar. "Kestrel Thorne?" she asked. I tensed immediately. Was this a journalist? Another process server? Someone else looking to capitalize on my situation? "Depends on who's asking," I said carefully. "Sloan Ashford," she said, extending her hand. "We actually met at a tech conference about 2 years ago. You gave a keynote on innovation in AI development." I was working on a competing platform at the time. We had a debate about neural network architecture that lasted 3 hours. I remembered suddenly. The conference in San Francisco. The intense conversation about machine learning that had stretched through dinner and into the hotel bar. She'd been brilliant, challenging every assumption I made, pushing me to defend positions I hadn't fully thought through. "I remember," I said. "You were right about the training data limitations, by the way. We ended up redesigning the whole system based on that conversation." "I know. I've been following your work. Pretty impressive what you've built at Arcturus." She paused, seeming slightly nervous for the first time. "Look, I don't want to be weird about this, but I also followed what happened with your ex, the lawsuit and everything. For what it's worth, I thought the whole thing was absurd. The idea that you somehow manipulated someone by not advertising your net worth? Please, that's just called having boundaries." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." "So, full disclosure," Sloan continued, "I'm about to ask you something, and if you say no, I completely understand. But I started a company 6 months ago. AI-driven solutions for climate modeling. We're doing some really innovative work with predictive algorithms. I'd love to pick your brain about some of the challenges we're facing. Maybe grab coffee sometime." I looked at her. This brilliant woman who was asking for professional advice, who knew exactly who I was and what I did, who was being completely upfront about her intentions. No games, no hidden agendas, just straightforward honesty. "I'd like that," I said. "Actually, I'd like that a lot." We exchanged numbers, and she rejoined her own group of friends across the bar. Bridger leaned over with a knowing smile. "Was that who I think it was? Sloan Ashford from Cascade AI?" You know her. Know of her. She's supposed to be one of the best minds in climate tech right now. Also, for the record, she was definitely hitting on you. She was asking for professional advice, I objected. Right, and I'm sure the fact that she smiled like that and played with her hair while asking had nothing to do with it. He clapped me on the shoulder. It's okay to move on, boss. You're allowed to be interested in someone again. Was I interested? I barely knew her. But there had been something in that brief interaction. Something easy and honest that felt like a breath of fresh air after months of manipulation and legal warfare. The evening wound down around 11. People started heading home, calling ride shares, making plans for the weekend. I stood outside the restaurant, the February air cold and crisp, watching my breath fog in the streetlight. My phone buzzed, a text from Sloan. Thanks for saying yes to coffee. How's next Thursday? There's a place in Capitol Hill that makes the best cortados in the city. I typed back, Thursday works. Send me the address. 3 dots appeared, then, full disclosure part 2. I'm actually interested in more than just professional advice. But we can start there and see where it goes. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people having coffee. I stared at the text for a long moment. This was it. The choice. Stay closed off and safe, or take the risk again. Trust that not everyone was like Thessaly. Trust that maybe, possibly, there were people in the world who could be honest and direct and real. I'd like that too, I typed back. See you Thursday. As I walked to my car, I thought about everything that had happened over the past few months. The betrayal, the lawsuit, the public scrutiny, the painful revelation of who Thessaly really was. It had been brutal, but it had also been clarifying. I knew now what I wouldn't accept in a relationship. I knew my own worth better. I knew which people had my back when things got hard. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to start building something new. Not the life I'd thought I had with Thessaly, which had been built on false pretenses and mutual deception. But something real. Something honest. Something where I could be fully myself, wealth and all, without apology or explanation. The snow had started falling again, dusting the streets in white. I drove home slowly, careful on the slick roads, thinking about Thursday's coffee date, thinking about Sloane's direct approach, her honesty about her intentions, thinking about how different that felt from Thessaly's calculated maneuvering. My apartment was still half empty when I got home, still bearing the scars of Thessaly's hasty departure. But it also felt more like mine now. I'd started redecorating over the past few weeks, slowly replacing shared items with things that reflected my actual taste. Art I'd always wanted but thought too expensive to explain. Furniture that was comfortable rather than just acceptable. Books about topics that fascinated me without worrying if they seemed pretentious. I poured myself a nightcap and stood at the window, looking out at Seattle's skyline. Somewhere out there, Thessaly was rebuilding her own life, hopefully learning from her mistakes. Somewhere out there, Ambrose Castellan was probably cursing the case that got away. And somewhere out there, Sloane Ashford was going about her evening, maybe thinking about Thursday's coffee date the same way I was. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from my mother. Just checking in. How are you doing tonight? I smiled and typed back. Actually, Mom, I think I'm doing okay. Maybe even better than okay. That's my boy. Love you. Love you too. I set my phone down and raised my glass to my reflection in the window. To survival. To truth. To the courage it took to stay open even after being hurt. To new beginnings that came from painful endings. Kestrel Thorne, 32 years old, Executive Vice President of Innovation, recently single, cautiously optimistic about the future. Not the person I'd been before Thessaly, not the person I'd been during our relationship. But maybe, finally, the person I was always meant to be, someone who didn't have to hide to be loved, someone who could stand in his full truth and trust that the right people would appreciate it, someone who'd learned that the real manipulation wasn't concealing his wealth. It was pretending to be less than he was to make others comfortable. The lawsuit was over. The relationship was over. The pretending was over. And whatever came next, it would be built on honesty from the ground up. No more tests. No more hiding. Just the truth, in all its complicated, messy, sometimes expensive glory. I thought about Thursday's coffee date, about Sloane's direct approach and easy smile. I thought about my team at work, the people who'd stood by me. I thought about my mother's wisdom and my father's memory. I thought about everything I'd learned about trust and vulnerability and the risk of opening your heart. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about what came next. Because Thessaly had tried to impress a millionaire at a party, not knowing I was his boss. But more than that, she'd tried to impress herself that she could trade up, that she could find someone better, that I was just a stepping stone to something greater. She'd been wrong about all of it. Not because I was wealthy, but because I was worth more than she'd ever recognized. And so was the life I could build without her. The snow continued to fall outside my window, covering Seattle in a blanket of white. Tomorrow it would melt. The city would return to its usual gray and green. But tonight it was beautiful, fresh, clean, a new beginning written in frozen water. I finished my drink, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time since that disastrous party 3 months ago, I slept through the night without waking, without replaying conversations, without second-guessing decisions, without wondering if I'd made a mistake, because I hadn't. I'd made the only choice I could live with. I'd chosen myself, my dignity, my truth. And that, more than any lawsuit victory or vindicated reputation, was what finally let me rest. The story of my girlfriend trying to impress a millionaire at a party, not knowing I was his boss, had ended. But my story, the one about figuring out who I really was and what I really deserved, was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see how it unfolded.